Hey, it's your boy Dustin from the Flying Chairs, the Rise podcast. And today, oh shit, I'm starstruck. Brit Elders. She's famous for the Billy Meier case and worked really close with Wendell and her husband Lee Elders. And they did some groundbreaking work back in the 70s, working with Billy Meier and exposing his story of having physical interactions with human-like ETs that came from the star system, the Pleiades star system. And yeah, again, very human-like. Again, people mistake my co-host. It might be one of those ETs. Chrissy gets that a lot. She takes it. But no. Again, she has some awesome stories, and we're just gonna dive right into it. So, Brit, I'm going to tell us where you grew up and how you got yourself into the UFO phenomena.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm looking forward to this. I grew up in Arizona primarily. My dad was literally a rocket scientist, worked with von Braun on the early missile projects. So we were at the Cape and Los Alamos and White Sands, but home was Arizona. And so I had this great left brain curiosity going. My mother was just amazing intuitive. She knew anything going on. You couldn't pull anything on her. And she had this wonderful right brain thing going. So I had the best of both worlds. You know, I had my dad laying around on the floor with his engineer buddies looking at schematics for the next missile they were going to launch. And the missiles at that time were going up and coming down. You know, they weren't going anywhere important. And they had talked about seeing things that were unusual in the skies that they couldn't identify, that weren't ours. And this is back in the 50s. So it kind of went in one ear, but it got stuck in there. You know, if I tell you how I met Lee, it's a whole different thing. I mean, I was skiing and I was coming back to Phoenix, and Lee had just come back from Ecuador. He spent a lot of time in the jungles of Ecuador, and he looked like just, you can't even imagine. His hair was stringy and long and bleach blonde from the sun, really tan. He was carrying 2 botaqueros, blowguns, 2 spears, and wearing a monkey pouch around his neck. Now, anybody in their right mind would run the other way. And we were standing in line. He was right behind me in line to go into a restaurant. And he says, "You want a table?" And I looked at him like, "Oh, God, go away." And he says, "Follow me." He walked right through the middle of the restaurant. It was like the parting of the Red Sea.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I followed him. And we were together from then on until he passed in 2018. We worked together. We played together. It was a 24/7 relationship.
Wow. Holy cow. That's so lucky of like both of you to find each other like that and just to be so indulged in the subject. And then again, so how did it trickle into like UFOs with you and him? Did it just come to a subject where you just personal interest? Yeah.
He was the trigger. Wendell knew Lee because Lee rode down to Ecuador on one of Wendell's planes with Wendell. And so Wendell was ferrying a plane down. He dropped it off. Unfortunately, it got confiscated by the military and sort of left him hanging in Ecuador. So they went out and they did some digs. Lee had several projects going there. He was working with the Shawnee Indians. He just took Wendell along with him, and they became friends. And Wendell lived in Tucson. We lived in Phoenix. And so there was this camaraderie, and Wendell was always talking about UFOs and look what I got out of Brazil and look at what happened in Russia and blah, blah, blah. You know, it was always something different and new. So Lee, you know, he was kind of open to it, but not really taken by it. He had seen something at an ASU, Arizona State football game, and had photographed it. Wendell says, "Oh my God, you got one." You know, he was so excited about it. So we just sort of had a casual relationship discussing these things. We got heavily into the Urantia book, talking about it and things like that, and listened to Wendell's stories that could go on for years. I mean, he had so much information.
Yeah.
And he had gathered not just the stories, but the photographs, and he had angel hair from Brazil, and he had all of this stuff. He had two rooms at his house that were devoted to just
Yes.
photographs,
Yep.
written details, and artifacts. It was quite amazing.
Yes.
So one day he called me. He says, "You have to get down here." And we said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, just come down here. Something's going on." So we jumped in the car and we drove to Tucson. And when we got there, we were introduced to a man who just seemed like a normal guy. He had been camping up on Mount Lemmon. And he thought, well, Lee was telling me, this is really strange. Why are we meeting this guy that's been camping? We sat down and started talking to him. He had a period of 8 hours of missing time. He
Mhm.
heard what he described as thousands of bumblebees, this high pitched kind of sound.
Mhm.
And then he lost time. His car and him were set on the other side of the mountain when he woke up.
Oh
He had
shit.
blood trickling down it out of his ear. A
Oh,
ranger found him and woke him up. And he explained his name was Carl. He gave us all the details, where he lived, where he was from, and what his background had been. He was one of the few people that could disarm a nuclear bomb.
wow.
And so we found it very interesting that, everything that had happened. Well, within just a few hours of this experience, he started showing up with red blotches on his chest and his arms, and then they were growing up his face. So we took him to a man who was known as the father of nuclear medicine at U of A. And he took one look at him and he says, "You have radiation poisoning."
Oh shit.
And so we made arrangements for Carl to go into the hospital. He was taken care of and then he was sent home. He actually lived in Tennessee. So we did that, and that was sort of our first UFO experience.
Mhm.
We remembered the buzzing sound and the bright light, and then that was it. About a
Interesting.
month later, Wendell calls again and says, "You got to get to Tucson." And we're going, "Oh, what now?" It's too strange for us. We had a very, I won't call it normal, but a very good business called Intercept. And we protected banks, Fortune 500s, other financial institutions from being eavesdropped on and wiretapped. So we had companies all around the world that we worked with. And we had a certain reputation of being very straight, very narrow, very direct. And we couldn't imagine our banker friends finding out we're now chasing UFOs. We thought, okay, that's going to kill our company. So we kind of hesitated about getting too involved or too curious. But Wendell was adamant we come down, and we did. And when we got there, laying on his dining room table, which was this like 8 foot long table, were enlargements of some of the Meier photographs. And there was a woman there by the name of Lou Zinstog, darling little lady, tiny little thing, fiery blue eyes, just totally into life. And she started telling us about this man with one arm in Switzerland that had taken all of these photographs and hundreds more.
Mhm.
And it was like, oh, wow. Well, our first reaction was they're too good to be true. It's impossible. It's got to be off a movie set or something because
Mhm.
no person would see something. And UFOs at that point were blobs in the sky and usually reported at night. Well, Wendell tried to get us involved. He says, "You got to put your company behind this." And we said, "No, we're not going to. We can't do that. Our bankers will go crazy." And he said, "Fine." So he went to Switzerland and he came back. He came straight to Phoenix. He sat down with us. He says, "You really have to get involved. This is too important."
Mhm.
And we thought, well, we've got a client in London. We'll go take care of that. When we finish that business, we'll just pop over to Switzerland and we will debunk the whole thing.
Mhm.
24 hours. No, we were there 5 days. And we came home with hundreds of photographs, movie footage, audio recordings of the craft, eyewitness accounts, and metal samples.
Yes.
And that's how we got involved with UFOs.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was gonna show a few of these photographs that he took in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
So crystal clear, and
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. And if
Impossible to
it,
fake.
no, especially with a guy with one arm, you're not gonna hold a a fishing pole with a line and snap some
Right.
photographs. No, and then they even did that demonstration too, and some of it didn't really look right. And no, and then the terrain. If you go to these
Oh,
places, you really can't. Like, there's no way you can hoist some of these.
That's so
especially
intense.
that area there.
Yes, and then he has series of photographs of you seeing this
Yeah.
UFO going across the sky and the terrain. So it's
Oh,
like,
yeah. Well,
beautiful.
even better than that, he had the craft. He had taken pictures of the craft behind known objects like the branch of a tree.
Hmm.
Okay. And that gives you a chance to really, when you're doing the analysis, get the depth, get the size of the craft, and you can triangulate all of this so you have the actual information you need. That last picture you showed us is very interesting because the story went out that that tree disappeared.
Yes, that's what I've
So
heard.
we went to the farmer where that tree was and we said, what happened to the tree, the big tree that was here? And he says, it died. So I cut it down.
Mm,
The interesting thing about that is variation one, that beautiful, sleek, silvery ship, leaked radiation.
mm,
And they told Billy about this. And that's why they took it out of service, they being the Pleiadians. And they brought in variation two and the further variations. But it was because it leaked radiation that it
yeah,
probably killed the tree. I mean, when we did the documentary Contact, which has been re-released as Contact from the Pleiades, the documentary film. Um, when we did that in 1982, we went to the original contact sites where Meier had his first meetings with Samyasa, and we measured the radiation, and it pegged. We measured his motorbike, his moped, it
yeah.
pegged. His belt buckle pegged. His gun pegged. Anything metal was just off the chart reading.
Hmm.
So when the farmer told us the tree just suddenly died, we could understand that.
Yeah. And that has happened with UFOs. There's
Yeah.
tons of cases with that radiation leaks. And I love that
Yeah.
even the landing pads on the grass there too,
Uh-huh.
they stayed almost year round. They
Right.
came like in a swirling pattern. There's a
Mm.
lot of bug life that came even afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's I think there's even like patterns in the snow too. There's
Yes.
times
Yeah.
where Billy, getting picked up from a UFO, and you see his footprints in the mud, and it just disappears or in the snow. It's
That
like, what
happened to us many times when we were
yeah.
filming. Oh, yeah, and it was something else.
And that's what I heard. Wendell was trying to catch him one time when he was about to run out, and he just, you know, it was too
We
late.
took a film crew.
Hmm.
We took a film crew to follow him. And you could see where his footprints, because it had rained heavily the day before. And we tracked his footprints into this big clearing and gone,
Gone.
just in the middle of nowhere, nothing else there. His footprints ended. It was really, yeah, it was
If
something. That happened several times.
once they make contact, they seem to track people and continue that conversation with people and continue a relationship with particular
Quite
people.
a,
I mean, I know
Mhm.
that they basically speak via ESP, from what I understand, and I believe that they know the thoughts of all of us. I really do. Collectively, I feel like they can sense our thoughts.
right.
Sure.
Well, they are telepathic, definitely. But they spoke to Meyer in his native Swiss German.
That's
And
awesome.
they said, first of all, they use women, females, as contacts because we're much more acceptable. You know, if you have a man, it becomes this little, I'm going to do my thing kind of routine. With a woman, a man is much more comfortable. So they bring a female in for the contact. They speak in the native tongue so that person is even more comfortable. But they monitored Billy for 10 years before they had contact.
Yes.
He had had contact with them as a child, but then
Yeah.
there was a
5 years old.
big, long period of time where nothing happened with the Palladians. And when they came back in, they monitored him to make certain he could mentally handle it because it's something so unique. And what they wanted to do was provide him documentation to his contacts. They didn't want him being in a position where he thought he was going crazy.
Yes. No, I think
So the,
the most impressive pictures that I think that he was taking was when he was living in India back
yeah,
in 1965.
60s, yeah,
And then he was living in this ashram with the families. And then he's not the only one witnessing this. That's another thing too I love about his India adventures, because he's not the only one seeing these in the sky. And he
right.
has the people he was living with seeing these things. I think there's one of the women that he stayed one of the girls and the maid
Mm-hmm.
to that family, and Samyazi. I don't know if it's her crew of ships there. And then there's an article in the Hindu newspaper
Yeah,
about him, and I think he had
yes.
about 80 pictures at the time. But again, I think these were more impressive because they're harder to fake, in my opinion. Because like I
Uh,
think later during I think last photographs, I think a lot of people were starting to be like, "Hey, what does that look like?" But
yeah.
I think a lot of this stuff in the beginning was just so impressive. Just there's no way you're faking that.
Well,
Like that.
the photographs he took in India and the whole experience there in India was it was sort of a growth pattern for him.
Mhm.
Because the man may not be educated as we think of an education, school learning, but he was worldly. He traveled
Yes.
Middle East, India, Europe, obviously, and he was curious about things. That's one of the things I love about Billy is he's just got such a wonderfully curious mind.
Yes.
But there were many people that saw those craft in India and photographed them as well. It wasn't just Billy. And that's one of the things that's so interesting about what happened to him in India.
Yes. Yes. That's why I think it's very important to hear that part of the story of him being in India and having multiple people seeing this stuff with him.
Yeah.
And even like there's, I think, a witness of him interacting with Ascot in India too, from a
One
distance.
person saw that, but these again, Ascot is a doll, a
Yeah.
being from the
So,
doll
yeah.
universe, not a
Right.
Palladian.
Right.
And that's what he was having contact with then. But there's a woman named Phobo Chang
Hmm.
that was very involved with his contacts while he was in India and has spoken about them publicly. She's a political person,
Yeah.
Vietnamese,
Hmm.
and she's getting older, and she has spoken about these for probably the last 20 years. Her experiences there, and she's taken a lot of heat for it, but she's
Yeah.
really come out and shared things that I think help people understand better what was going on with him.
Yeah. No, I think it adds to a big piece of the story,
Yeah.
hearing her part of it, and the fact of living in India and him traveling the world. He was kind of like the Indiana Jones kind of a guy. He was like a snake wrangler, and he was like a
Oh,
bounty
wow.
hunter too. Wasn't he?
He
Didn't he do
he
that too?
did every kind of odd job. He was a member of the French Foreign Legion. I mean, he just
Yeah. Hmm.
his list of jobs is like 2 pages long. It's single spaced, you
And
know.
then when did he lose his arm again? What year was
Yeah,
that?
I don't remember the year. It was in Turkey in a bus accident, though.
Right. I think he
Yeah.
was sticking his arm out the window, and then
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh,
I
that's
think
horrible.
was it a drunk driver that hit the bus and
I've
then it
heard both
rolled over
stories,
and crushed his
and
arm?
I've heard both stories, and Billy hasn't talked about it that much. He told us
It's pretty dramatic.
that
I
it was a
wouldn't either.
bus accident and that he still, even when we were first talking to him, and still today, he has that phantom feeling of his
Oh,
own
sure.
being there. So
Oh
yeah,
shit, man, that must be trippy.
yeah.
And then
But I'll tell
he,
you, it does not stop him.
no, it doesn't.
Does not view himself as handicapped in any way.
No,
Um,
you should see
he,
him at a typewriter with that one arm.
oh
My
yeah,
God, he's just like he's like a machine.
you should see him
And he's
set up
like,
his movie
he's
camera.
86 years
Lose
old, and he's
that?
just like,
Oh,
Yeah, he is really something.
no, he's an amazing character, and I love how people from all around the world flock to hear the story and just to
Yeah,
witness it for their own eyes. And I love how people can do that and go to the center, the Figu
yeah,
Center that became, or it became Figu after a while, after it got so much more attention, where people wanted to be there almost full time, just the hopes to get the glimpse of seeing something happen and learn the teachings that
yeah.
Billy's been. I don't know if you follow much of the teachings. I personally don't. I mean, I love the fact that it's there, and I just more of the nuts and bolts type of guy where like I love the pictures and the the videos
Yeah,
and the
it's,
stories. And no, I think it's great, and I'm
I
kind of like,
think teachings are important from the standpoint of not treating them as something you live by, just when you think about it, because they're talking about creation, they're talking about love,
yes,
they're talking about the developing spirit of the human being, things like that. They're interesting to read, they're profound, they give you a lot of information. As an investigator, I can't prove a word of it.
right,
I have to say, this could be Billy, this could be the Palladians. But if there's good information there, I don't care where it comes from.
sure.
You read and you learn. But as an investigator, I want the nuts and bolts things too.
Yes, that's cool. Oh, I'm glad that we're on the same page. That too. 'Cause I feel like, especially when Paula Harris was telling me like I'm kind of like Wendell's understudy. I was just like, what? Even come from her mouth, I was just like, oh my God. And he's like, she's Wendell's probably looking down from heaven, looking at you, sharing all these
oh,
photographs still and telling the stories of Wendell. Because I'm more about Wendell. I mean, I do love Billy Meier's stuff, but I'm more because Wendell just didn't focus on Billy Meyer, even though he loved Billy
Wendell
Meyer
is
himself.
like a
He was,
godfather to the UFO community
he is, he totally is.
because he was boots on the ground when
Yes,
everybody was still doing armchair analysis and saying, oh, I don't think that's good. We won't look at it anymore. Wendell would say, to hell with that. And he'd get in his car and he'd drive across the country to meet
yes,
somebody that claimed to have a contact or had new photographs. He really wanted to know. And this was something that, it came up with him when he was working in the Air Force and
mhm.
he was on the Parmesan Project. And when they started getting footage up in Alaska of these craft, and it was gun camera footage that
Mhm.
the pilot would get off, hand it to somebody who would chain it to their wrist and head for Washington. He got curious. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. No, it's so cool. And yeah, no, it's endless. And then like the one other story that I really like from, I think it was shortly after hearing about Meyer's case when he was out in Holland about in 1960 working with this other millionaire that actually had his encounter when he was with his family on a boat, and
Oh
they
no,
hit
we
something in
were
the,
there.
you were
That
there for that
was
one? Oh my
that
God.
was
Okay.
Den
This is
Haag.
yes,
Yeah,
okay, this is great.
that was in
So
Den
I love this
Haag
story
with
too. The
Stephan
whole story is
Dardi.
so good because yeah, he hits something in the water and he knows the body just floating on top and he jumps over the railings. This was his first reaction. Gets this guy that has a suit with a helmet that was totally circled with a blue light that was just shining through the where the face would be, and he's just totally confused. And then a UFO rises out of the water and a tower door opens and another guy comes on in the same suit, and then the family on the other side of the boat screaming and crying while this thing is coming on to pick up his buddy that was knocked out. And then he waves goodbye, and then the next morning they show up again and invites
Stephan.
Stefan, yeah, sorry. um
Stephan Dardi.
yeah, and asked him to come on board and
Yeah.
shows this kind of like, hey, want to thank you again, and if you want to ask us some questions. And he kind of starts asking them tons of questions. Kind of, they actually said they had like iPads when he was asking questions. They kind of
Mhm.
the images would just pop up, and uh they're again very unique looking extraterrestrials, kind of like the horse face, very bony.
Yeah,
You
goat
can't,
face with coxcomb.
yeah.
Very unusual looking beings,
And the,
benevolent, had a different sense of spirituality than we do. They had more
yes,
of a worship of machinery and things like that. But Stefan started waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and
yes,
writing everything down. And I mean, he had transmissions that were just remarkable. And
yes,
it was like speed writing, or automatic
yes,
writing. It was just flowing through. And that went on for a number of years. But the interesting thing to that whole mix was we had a friend with MI6, and he called us one day and he says, we're having the strangest things happen in the North Sea. At 3 o'clock in the morning, we're getting these radio bursts, these
yes.
transmission bursts. And Lee says, what are you talking about? And Mark explained, it's happening 3 o'clock on the dot every morning.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense. We cannot decipher what this means. And then Lee told him about what was going on with Stefan. And he said, oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Wendell actually told a story about that, where I guess he was in the area and there was actually military or some government actually noticing the same signals coming to this area. And Wendell had to
MI6
kind of
was
like be very
British.
secret
Yeah.
about like, okay, I gotta make sure they don't know
No,
about this guy that I know.
we
That's funny.
it was our friend that uncovered the transmission signals coming in to MI6, and that they're the ones that were having this whole, what is this? Where is
Yeah.
it going? What's it saying? And they couldn't define it. And when his contacts ended, those transmissions ended as well. So,
Wow.
Mark kept us up to date on everything they were getting from the intelligence side. And Stefan, he got to a point where he couldn't ask any more questions.
Sure.
He didn't
Sure.
have anything else to say, and he
Sure.
didn't feel like he was contributing. So
And
he
that's
wrote a book that was
mhm.
published in Dutch, and then Wendell brought it back out and he republished it. Yep.
I'm a big fan. I have a lot of Wendell books.
Yep, and you can see from that being they would scare the hell out of most people. Yeah,
Yeah. But again, the story is so great. And the fact
it
that
is.
he's a millionaire. And then that
Yeah,
makes it another a big part of it too. It's just like this guy wasn't trying to find fame or wasn't trying to make
yeah,
money from his story. And again, he like could have again like potentially go on and fake more contacts coming into him because he was getting attention, or maybe he
yeah.
didn't want to have as much attention because I think he used a kind of a different name too to kind of keep it on the DL because everybody kind of
Well,
knew he was.
Stephan Denardi is his pen name.
Is
He's
it?
asked us not to use his real name.
Yes.
It means Stephen of Earth.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's again, I think in my eyes shows more proof that that shit was real.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Definitely. But there have
Um,
been many sightings like that in the North Sea of underwater ships that, people will see coming out of the ocean or have actually slammed into other craft on the way up. Yeah, exactly.
so I think I got 20 of these books.
You have a whole library.
Oh
This
my
is
god, I
good.
spent like thousands of dollars on like Wendell's stuff and collection. Yeah,
But
so
that's,
and you too. Yeah.
With Wendell, that was the type of research he did. Not just Stephan Denardi, because we were in on that on a whole different thing, but the undersea books, he got into little minutia detail from people that had reported a story and nobody had followed up on it. So he'd fly or drive or whatever it took, take a train. I can't tell you how many times he took trains across Europe trying to track people down to talk to him. But yeah, he wanted to learn as much as he could about the subject. And he was thorough in most of his documentation. I mean, very, very thorough.
Yeah.
But he accessed it and he treated it a little differently than some of the other groups back in those days were treating things. It
Right.
wasn't a random judgment. It was, let's take a serious look at it and just
Yes.
see what it can teach us.
Yes. You ever? I'm pretty sure you heard this case too with Wendell, Paul Villa.
Oh, yeah.
That's another great case. There, it's here in New
Yeah.
Mexico, and I kind of think it
Yeah.
started in California, where he had
Hmm.
his first contact with another giant human guy. Came and says, we have some connection with your soul, and he's like, what? Then he sees this UFO. He's like, let me show you out there that UFO that's just chilling out in the water.
Connection with your soul. Could that possibly mean that they had co-created that person? I know they've mixed genetic information.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they also, most of the extraterrestrial groups that I've investigated believe in reincarnation, and
Yeah,
they connect with your soul on that level because they recognize the energy from that life.
yeah,
Oh, what?
yeah. No, it's so cool. And actually, I have a lot of Paul Villa's
Oh,
collection from
yeah.
Wendell's here. Just the whole
Those are
series,
incredible photographs.
aren't they? Oh my
Go
God.
back to the time they were taken. Again, too good to be true in initial estimation, but
No, I thought it'd be a treat having the, because you probably seen these with your own two eyes in one period of time even back in
oh,
the day.
yes.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just like I cannot believe I'm holding it. You know what I'm saying?
It's amazing. Yeah,
Great.
Oh
you got them.
Jesus. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
got
that's
him.
crazy.
I, again, I was lucky enough to win those bids. I was battling other people, so I
Well,
was
good
like,
for you. That's
well,
really
my
great.
heart was where it was at, straight up. It's like I need this. I want to continue Wendell's story, and no,
Yeah.
again, I got to meet all these people I've idolized and just watched on Ancient Aliens and other
Hmm.
documentaries. I'm really into the old school documentaries, so it fits
Yeah.
where you're at. So I'm like,
Well, I don't know if you ever saw the documentary Abduction. That was
uh,
that we did.
okay.
That was one of Wendell's cases, and he asked us to do it. It was about a man by the name of Bill Herman, and
Oh yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
involved Zeta Reticulans. Yeah. And we did the documentary on that, and it was, I mean, I felt so sorry for this poor guy because he was so religious. It was such a conflict for him. And the hypnosis he went through did nothing to alleviate the panic that he had. It only increased it to the point he took all of the physical evidence and went and threw it in the river.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he didn't want anything else to do with the case.
Oh, did you ever get involved with the Adamski case? So I know
Only
that one's a little back and forth, especially with the Billy Meier too. I heard there's a
only on
little,
the edges, and I knew a lot about Adamski through Timothy Good. I knew a lot about Adamski through some other people involved in intelligence.
yeah.
One particular individual who really followed Adamski when he was doing his thing at Big Rock and all of that. So I have a lot of information on that, but never personally involved, other than
Okay.
just listening and learning, and
I'm about
which
I'm about Howard Manger.
no, not really. I
No.
haven't
Okay.
followed any of that.
Okay. Yeah. Again, these are very interesting stories with human-like, blonde-haired women ETs, just like my
Yeah.
co-host. She's an ET, believe it or not. Yeah.
I am called an alien very often, and it's the best compliment you can receive.
I know, right?
Yeah, really. In today's world, I agree.
Yes, yes, I would rather not be of this world. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases in South America too, where
Oh
they
yes.
had
Hmm.
contact with tall blonde beings, and man, some of those cases are really remarkable.
Yes.
We have an attorney down there, had an attorney who's passed away in Cuenca, and they were sitting in a restaurant at this big political meeting, and a craft came in, a variation two type craft
Oh
came
wow.
in, and he says it was so close he could have thrown his keys and hit it. And then 2 days later, two of the gentlemen that were in the meeting had face to face contact with this person that came up, spoke to them in Spanish with no dialect, no strange tone. I mean, just flat voice,
Flat.
and said, "We saw you from our craft." And
Oh.
just freaked these poor guys out. I mean, when they told us about it, they were still shaking.
Oh Oh, that's funny. You ever heard of the case Joe Simonton, Eagle River, 1961?
No, I haven't.
Oh, this is an interesting case. I'll tell you really quick. I love it. So Joe Simonton, 1961, was sitting in his kitchen eating breakfast or lunch, and he happens to see this silver UFO just come like an elevator landing onto his driveway. And he's just like confused. He's like, what the hell is this? So he runs out, and this door opens like a latch,
Hmm.
and it was a human pops out, and he looked like an Italian man with a white or with a blue tight jumpsuit, and he had a
Hmm.
empty jug, and he was like motioning for water, and Joe's like, "Do you want water?" And he like the extraterrestrial didn't say anything. It just had very penetrating eyes where Joe couldn't really look into his face without, just felt weird. So
Uh-huh.
he grabbed the jug from the ET and got some water, and he came back and he noticed inside the craft there were two other men just like him, dressed the same. They were over a flat, flameless grill that they were cooking some type of pancakes. And Joe got four of these pancakes for
Oh.
this the exchange of water. And he still was trying to still get some conversation going. He's like, "Do you want me to eat this? What is this?" And Joe took a bite of one of them and said it tastes like a piece of cardboard.
It looks like a piece of cardboard.
It
Exactly
does.
right.
It does not look good.
No.
So, so the ETs just jumped him back into the craft and just took off, and it shot like a bullet into the sky. And Joe was just standing there baffled with these greasy pancakes in hand. So he calls the authorities to come over to tell his story. And apparently, I guess there was other calls of UFO in the area from other people.
Uh-huh.
And Joe tells the story, and he has these pancakes analyzed by scientists, and
Oh, good.
they found out that they're regular buckwheat pancakes, but did not have any trace of salt. And that's impossible because everything organic on Earth has a trace of salt
Yes.
because of the oceans. So
Interesting.
yeah, so the fact that this guy has these buckwheat pancakes that's just missing some elements that should be in there, is this
Yeah,
kind of maybe made off world? Doesn't mean that, other plants can be, made off planet or even in a lab or something that, whatever the hell.
uh-huh.
But just very eerie. And it makes you wonder where the hell did communion come from? That sounds like a communion exchange, does it not? It's like,
Traded
how,
bread for water.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly, right. So it's like,
That sounds
did
like a
it
very
stem from that?
friendly exchange. I
It
know
was. It's very,
there's a lot of negative connotation when it comes to ET experiences, but I know also sometimes they can be very enlightening. And I find it so interesting that we as humans, um, we experiment on animals because we deem them less intelligent than
yes.
us. But
Mhm.
clearly, if ETs are coming here, they are far more intelligent than us, and we should live by our own rules and understand that if they are experimenting on us, those are our
Exactly.
own rules.
Yes.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's so important because everybody goes on about abductions primarily from the standpoint of, oh, they were abducted and then tests were run and this and that. And I always have to say, look what we do to each other. I
Yes.
Yep.
mean, not just the animals, what we do to each other. We
Yes.
experiment on humans. So,
Yes.
Yes.
what do you expect until we get to a point where we have a little more respect for ourselves and our fellow creatures here? I don't think we can expect that they're going to understand that on that level.
Oh,
Yes.
very true. And even, I was some paranormal investigating at Letchworth Village, which is an old mental asylum. They used to keep developmentally disabled people there, but they were doing
Uh,
lobotomies on people against their will. They were
Ooh.
doing experiments on people against their will because they deemed them less intelligent, therefore they didn't have rights. This wasn't even that long ago. And that's how we behave.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I think in the seven, I
So
think I saw like a
why
real
are we,
dark documentary of a mental asylum where they just like put like
yeah,
football
yeah,
helmets
it
on them
can
and
honestly
just
be
kind of
very
throw them in a
scary when you
room.
look
Oh my God. It's just like,
you
but
look
uh,
this
into
is
that
what
type
we
of
do
stuff.
to each other, and
That's
we
what we
haven't
do to each
stopped.
other.
So we've got to, start kicking it up an octave and start respecting each other a little bit more. Yeah.
Right.
yes.
But then
No,
we have the
that's
audacity to say, I can't believe that man was abducted and experimented on.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
a little hypocritical, don't you think?
Exactly.
A lot. Yes.
And then
Mhm.
there's the cow mutilations that we find all around the world too. I think
Yeah.
Linda Moulton Howell brought that to an
She's done a
attention.
lot of research on that, probably the foremost research in that.
Yeah.
I've seen cattle mutilations, and they are confusing looking at them. How did this happen?
Yeah.
It's so
There's no
perfect.
blood anywhere.
Grain of
And they're like
blood,
surgical
like
cuts on the.
surgical precision, mysterious.
Yeah, really unique.
So yeah, it's like a genetic harvest of some sort. And
Well, it happens overnight, doesn't it? I mean, in
yeah.
hours,
Oh yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
less.
Yeah.
in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've run into it quite a bit out here. I live in northern Arizona, and we have a lot of cattle ranges. And yeah, you'll be driving along, and there's a dead cow, and it's obvious it didn't die from normal circumstances. It's kind of
Another famous abduction case that we are very fortunate to have Kevin Parker
yeah.
on our podcast
Oh, that's
right
good.
before he died.
That's good.
Yeah, that's the am I saying that?
Pensacola.
Yeah, or Pensacola.
Pascagoula.
Pascagoula.
Sorry. Yeah.
That case, that was a very interesting and unique case. And the fact that these guys passed a lie detector test, and even the cops were trying to fool them after they came forward to the cops telling their story
Yeah.
that they brought like a tape recorder in the room to see if they had like a little story that they were trying to rouse up for this case. But no, they were Kevin Parker was pretty got PTSD after all that shit happened to him. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, this craft, like an egg-shaped craft, came down with like these two blue lights in front of it, and these three, it looked like giant robotic extraterrestrials with pointy ears and a pointy nose, not much of eyes or mouth, but had like claw-like hands. They were floating off the ground when they came towards them and grabbed Parker and knocked him out right away.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fact that they were interacting with a human woman too after they were in the ship getting experimented on, and she had like this, I think her hair was like turquoise, he said too. It was really gnarly. I was like, damn, that girl sounded hot. But no, she stuck her finger down his throat and really made it irritated, and they were using telepathic, say it's just everything's all right, nothing's gonna happen to you, but we're throwing our experiments on you and hell. But again, these guys were terrified and traumatized after their experience enough where they wanted to share their story and then take lie detector tests. And yeah, they made it
gutsy of them at the time.
Yes, it was
Really gutsy of them. And they went through hell.
Yeah, they did.
So many people just poo-poo the whole thing and say it never happened and they were liars. But I've worked with a lot of abductees over the years, and one of the things that's sort of interesting to me is I always ask them what they were doing when they saw the craft.
Yeah.
And they go, wow, I was studying it. I was walking towards it. I was thinking, what is that? And I said, so you made the initial contact.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, hadn't thought of it that way. I thought I was abducted. I walked right up to it.
And he's like,
interesting.
When you can do that, it breaks it apart. That fear seems to sort of crumble.
Yes. Yeah. And then again, Parker and Charles Hickman. Yeah, they were totally surprised. They were fishing on a pier, and they just happened to turn around and see these two things coming at them.
Yeah,
they're like, "Oh snap!"
Well, how would you feel if you saw something floating towards you?
Oh, yeah, I'd be like, And he was even thinking about jumping in the water, but he thought there was like tons of metal and other crazy junk because it was really a filthy river they were fishing in. But yeah, again, they were just kind of just in shock and just stood there until these things touched them and picked them up and threw them in the craft.
I honestly don't understand why people assume that everyone's making these stories up because of the absolute hell that people catch from telling the truth about this and telling their stories. Why would anyone want that? I mean, it comes down on these
That's
It's not
another thing
worth
about.
I
I
mean,
like I like to come back to Paul Villa because he actually
yeah,
wasn't the one to come out with his story at all. It was his friends and family that took his photographs. He's like, I gotta
that's
show
true.
the public this, and it ruined his life. They had all these
Yeah,
UFO investigators coming to him saying like, no, this is all fake. You're just throwing a frisbee up in the air, and he's like, he became
Yeah,
right,
he became a hermit after that. Like he
yeah,
didn't want
he
to talk
does.
to
right.
anybody.
It ruins people's lives sometimes. And it's like,
It does.
why would people want that? Why would people do that on purpose? Come on now.
Yeah.
Well, to take it back to the Meier case, Myers had over 30 attempts that I know of on his life.
Yes.
Wendell was present during one. We were present during one. Um, I've talked to people that were present when he's been shot at. Lee and I were there at the farm when a van pulled up and tried to kidnap his daughter
Oh my God.
and push her into the van. Fortunately, Nina got away. Um, and when you talk to Billy about it, and you would expect some type of a reaction like, are you angry? What are you feeling? And he says, I can't be angry at them. They don't know any better. He's
True.
so mellow about it.
That's cool.
And he just says, I know when these things are going to happen. At one point, Samyasa had told him someone is going to shoot at you. And he actually made a little metal plate that he wore around his
Yes,
neck.
I remember that. Yeah.
And that stopped the bullet. Another time he had a book in his pocket, that stopped a bullet. Um, when you dig into why people are doing things like that, it's fear. They're afraid. They don't know what's going on. They don't want to take the time to understand or even try to understand. It makes it very difficult for an experiencer, whether it's a contactee or an abductee, because you are going to have fingers pointed at you. You're going to be labeled a hoax. You're going to be labeled crazy. You're going to be labeled everything. We had the same things happen as investigators. Now, this is back in the 70s when people whispered UFO. They
Yeah.
never said it out loud. They got in a corner and said, hey, did you see that thing? No, it's a very different time.
Yeah.
Um, Today, it's open conversation, and you can ask almost anybody about it, and they've got
Yes.
an opinion, which I think is wonderful. But it's a different time for most people. For some, they're still carrying that fear of the unknown, and they've got to attack it because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I just always keep sort of waiting for them to have their own experience. They'll come around eventually. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It really kind of takes your own experience or
it
just
does.
getting heavily indulged into the subject. Because yeah, I
Yeah.
just went down the rabbit hole after I had my experience, and then finding out that Wisconsin is a treasure trove of modern day UFO sightings. We have three
Yeah.
towns that claim to be the UFO capital of the world: Dundee, Elmwood, and Belleville. And all three towns have yearly UFO parades by decorating their cars
Lucky
like flying
you.
Oh, I
saucers
love it.
and dressing up like aliens and reminiscing old UFO stories. And I've been to a few of these events too. They're very fascinating. The fact that people are very uh, so enthusiastic about their town and the love for
Yeah.
UFOs. It's like, yes, yes. Like, this is it. In my eyes, it's like a modern day cargo cult, how we have
Yeah.
the cargo cults that I like to stem to. That's how I think all religion, I think that's the smoking gun of how religion started. The little
Uh-huh.
cargo cults. Um, no, it's very impressive. I think that's the weird thing about humans. Like when something we don't understand that comes from the sky, we, especially back then, we didn't have the vocabulary, and they get godlike status right away. And then after they
Yeah.
leave, there comes them dressing like the extraterrestrials, practicing what they were doing and learn, or what they have taught. They put it into practice. Agriculture, mathematics, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
But that's
that's
another thing that we humans want to do. We want to equate someone that's had a different experience than ourselves as being somehow superior to us.
mm,
And you can't do that. I mean, that's not real. They just had a different experience. That's all.
yes, yeah,
And I've found that to be so true with you have that group that is fear-oriented with abductees and contactees, and then you have the group that stick the others on pedestals and
Yes. It's a
worship
weird
at their
mix.
feet, and that's a problem too. I
Hmm.
mean, just take the story, learn from it,
Yes.
advance yourself with what you can, but I wouldn't go either direction. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be afraid, and I'm not going to stick someone on a pedestal. Yeah.
No, that's why I feel like your work and your husband's and Wendell's is so important. That's why I feel a lot of people who get into this subject, that's the homework you need to learn. That's the stuff where
Oh, thank
there
you.
is no like, no, seriously, there is no AI, there's no
Right.
Photoshop. You know what I'm saying? There's no these, and then you
And we
guys
didn't even
put
have
the
cell
time.
phones then.
No, yeah, and you guys went and like traveled the world to these people and sat there not just for days, for like years sometimes with these people to get their story right and make sure this is the stuff you want to put out and actually get your evidence because you're a researcher, you're investigating this stuff, and especially
Truth
you want to get your
finder.
facts right.
She's a truth finder. I really
She is.
respect that.
And thank
Fuck
you.
yeah.
It's about digging, and every time you think, okay, I've got this nailed, you think of some other direction to take it. So you end up, I mean, what should have been, or what we expected to be, I'll put it that way, a very brief stay in Switzerland, took 7 years.
Wow.
That's how long the investigation went on. And we were in laboratories from universities to JPL. We were working in Japan, we were working in Europe, we were working on this case in the US. And every laboratory you can imagine, MIT, Boeing Labs, IBM, Scripps Institute.
Wow.
We just had to keep going, to keep trying to figure out, one, how it was done, or if it was a fake, how was it faked? And
Yes.
the one constant throughout everything was the scientists said, we don't know what it is. We can't explain it, but we can't duplicate it either.
Yep. Hmm.
Now, what do you do with that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
And
try to
then
duplicate it. And they
and the
couldn't.
yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
the fact that the case is still ongoing is amazing.
Yes.
That's what I love about it. And everybody who gets into it just has to get their own, do their own research. That's another thing.
Yeah.
So you have to do your own homework. It doesn't just come to you, and it's not. No, it's just
As an
there's so
investigator,
much. Oh, there's so much. Oh,
there is.
yeah.
But
It's
as an
almost
investigator, I can't tell anybody, you got to think this way or you got to think that way or believe this or believe that. You got to go find it on your own
yes,
because it's what's resonating with you. What resonates with me may be 180 degrees, and that's okay. But you got to go figure it out for yourself. What is real for you? I know, Christy, with your paranormal investigations and things, I'm totally into ghosts too. So, I mean, this is
Yeah.
there we
something
go.
I've experienced. I get
Oh,
it. I know it. It's cool. But
Yes.
whether it's UFOs or any form of something we don't understand, do your own research. Figure it out. Read everything you can, learn from it. You're going to find just little pearls in everything and go from there.
perfect.
And don't
That
ever listen to someone tell you, believe me, because you can't do it that way.
true. Well, on that note, I think we just made it to an hour. That was
Oh
What a
my
so
great
gosh.
perfect.
ending.
I
Yeah.
know.
What a
that,
poetic ending to
that was so awesome. Britt, I would love to have you back on for another
Oh,
show.
I'd
Maybe we can
love it.
like
That would
maybe
be
get some
great.
other Figu people into it. Maybe we can get Christian Frainer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can, that'd be
Michael
really cool.
Verlander. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really cool. Maybe Paula Harris too. It'd be really
Oh, that'd
cool.
be great. Yeah. We can tell
Yes.
stories.
Like, hey, can you stay with me for 2 more minutes?
Sure.